So I'll now pass on to Dustin Reed, who's going to talk about international collaboration in the time of COVID-19, learning from a partnership between Virginia Tech and ESDES. So over to you, Dustin.
All right, thanks, Deborah. Hopefully our screen share will work here. Did that pop up for everyone? Everyone have a good visual?
Yep, that's working.
All right, great. Well,
we just need it on presentation mode.
Oh, gotcha. Excuse me, I thought I was, but there we go. Presentation mode?
Yep, great, thank you.
Great. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for being here, and thanks for hanging in there through a 6-paper panel. It's always tough to stick in for that last paper, but I appreciate your attention. I just wanted to start off with a couple of quick apologies before I launch into my discussion here for the last 15 minutes. The first one goes out to the audience in general. This is my first virtual conference presentation, so it may not be as polished as I'd like, but we'll do the best we can. And the second, it's about a 3:30 a.m. start time here in Virginia. So if I've still got sleep in my eyes and I'm looking a little groggy, I apologize for that. I'm gradually waking up. A couple other apologies. One was to ERES leadership in general, that I must have upset someone along the way to give me this 3:30 a.m. Start time for a conference presentation. So sincere, Deborah and all the leadership team, sincere apologies. I hope I get a better time slot next year. And finally, a quick apology to my fellow panelists that I really enjoyed all the talk so far. And Graham and Herman, great discussion of really thoughtfully designed courses. Yahweh, Irvi, Cynthia, really love the empirical analysis and clearly defined research questions. I've got none of that to offer you. I'm going to talk to you about a very quickly designed course that kind of emerged on the fly. And all of my conclusions are rather unsubstantiated and subjective. So with all those caveats in mind, I'll tell you a little bit about a learning experience I've had developing a course during COVID, and hopefully at least it will serve for some discussion amongst the panel. So this isn't going to come as any surprise to all of you working in higher education that COVID has been extraordinarily disruptive to the enterprise of study abroad. So lots of traditional programs have been disrupted if they've been able to be offered at all, because of travel restrictions and limitations and rescheduling of semesters. Students have become very leery about study abroad just because they're unsure about the international environment, they're unsure about health concerns, and they're currently less willing to travel even if they can. The students we've talked to that have actually gone on study abroad experiences during COVID when they've been allowed to do so, they're just not having the same experience, right? They're not able to interact with fellow students in the same way. They're not enabled to engage with the culture in the same way. So all these things have kind of changed the value proposition of study abroad and international exchange to some degree. And we're also finding that many institutions have been kind of caught flat-footed by the COVID-19 pandemic, that they had very well established models for higher ed study abroad, but all those models broke down and international offices really didn't know how to respond. So all these things are rather unsurprising, but we're seeing many institutions rethink how they approach study abroad and what it's going to look like moving forward. So all those things are obviously challenging, but the good news out of this is it's really forcing academics, both administrators and professors, to really rethink study abroad and how we can make it a more valuable enterprise for our students in light of all the things that are going on in the world right now. So I'm really just going to speak about my experience trying to come up with an interesting international exchange opportunity for our students under all the constraints we currently face. So my opportunity kind of stems from a class I was already teaching that for the last dozen years or so, I have traveled to Lyon, France, and taught a real estate investment seminar at ESDES, the business school of the Catholic University of Lyon. It's really been a great experience. That the French system, as many of you may know, is quite different from the American system. In the US, we have kind of very rigid academic calendars where most of our classes meet 3 hours a week over the course of a 15-week semester, and students are expected to engage over that entire period of time. In the French context, The courses may vary much more in duration. They can be delivered over multiple weeks, or they can be delivered in quite a compressed format. So this works out really well for faculty that want to come teach in a French business school, because I can go to Lyon, deliver an entire course in real estate investments over the course of 1 week, where I have 21 contact hours with graduate students, and we do a very high level overview of real estate fundamentals and real estate investment fundamentals. So it's something I've done quite a bit in their graduate program for finance and markets. And typically the way the course is structured is it's a relatively straightforward kind of lecture and course interaction type setup with students completing a comprehensive exam, as well as doing an independent case study where they go out and identify a property somewhere in France that they would be interested in investing in, and they do a full market analysis, financial analysis, management plan for that asset, and present that to me at the end of the 1 week seminar. So it's a very accelerated class, but in the past it's worked very well in this context because it's really just an introduction to real estate. The students I teach in Lyon have no background in real estate at all. They're finance students first and foremost. So this is really just something to whet their appetite for real estate, to see if it might be a field they have some interest in. So this year, while I've always done this live in the past, this year the format went online because of the pandemic. So I plan to teach it as an online synchronous course and really teach it much the same way, with the only difference being me being on a Zoom as opposed to in the classroom. But my colleague in Lyon, a gentleman by the name of Oussama Labidi, he came to me and said, well, you know what, this is kind of an interesting opportunity to engage some Virginia Tech students. So Virginia Tech is my home institution, where we have a very large undergraduate program in real estate. And the idea came up, why don't we take, there's 10 students that were participating in the seminar course in Lyon this year. And Oussama suggests, why don't we pair them up with Virginia Tech students and have them collaboratively complete the case study. So make it more of an international real estate investment course for the American students, and really structure it like a 1 hour independent study, where all they're doing is collaborating online with the French students to execute these real estate investment analyses and present the results of that analyses at the end of this independent study. So that's exactly what we did. We reached out to the director of the real estate program here. We asked for 10 high performing real estate students that might be interested in participating in something like this. And we effectively paired them up with French students. So the students were working in pairs, one French student, one Virginia Tech student, to execute a real estate investment case study. So the kind of the distinction between the two, the American students were not attending the lectures. They were not sitting in on the Zoom calls because they've already they were at the end of their program of study, had many classes in real estate already, presumably understood the fundamentals quite well. And they were just using this more as an international experience to, one, learn a little bit about evaluating properties in a foreign context, and two, to have an opportunity to collaborate with an international student and hopefully expand their international network and gain some understanding of how challenging and rewarding international collaboration can be. So the students were not participating in the lectures, just executing the case study, and doing this really on their own time. They were getting academic credit for this, but really that academic credit, they didn't need it towards graduation. So this is really largely a voluntary exercise for the American students. And in terms of the course structure, some kind of interesting things about the way this was pulled together. One, the collaboration was entirely virtual. And that's obvious. The students weren't in France, and the French students weren't in the US. So all their interactions took place online, predominantly through Zoom meetings. But the only reason I bring this up is because I didn't really provide any guidance at all about how the students should collaborate and how they should work together. Basically, I sent along a list of deliverables. Here's the scope of the project. You have to start off by identifying a real estate investment strategy. So you have to talk to me a little bit about the product type you're considering investing in, what type of markets you want to seek out, whether you're kind of a core investor, a core plus investor, a value add investor, and also how you plan to use leverage strategically to achieve defined investment goals. So students had to first kind of craft this overarching investment strategy. Then they had to go identify a property in France that they thought conformed with that investment strategy and conduct a financial analysis, a market analysis, and ultimately a management and operation plan to think about the property management and asset management implications of acquiring that type of building. So they were provided with those general parameters, but any other means of collaboration was purely at the student's discretion. So this truly was an independent learning experience in many ways, with relatively guidance from me once the students were put into pairs and started to work together. Another somewhat interesting feature of the course structure was peer feedback. That in the absence of the opportunity for the students to kind of deeply engage with their French counterparts, I wanted to try to kind of create opportunities for student engagement through a peer evaluation process. So what I did was I took each student and basically said, okay, each group of students, you have 3 peer evaluations you have to complete over a 3-week period, because the entire duration of this course was 3 weeks. So each week, students had to evaluate another group's, a portion of another group's presentation or project. So the projects, I divided them into kind of 3 components. The first component was kind of the overall investment strategy. The second component was the financial and market analysis. The last component was the operational and management plan. So each week, students would meet with another group and talk through that portion of their project, provide feedback to the other group about their project, and go through this kind of peer evaluation process where they could iterate towards an improved project design by the end of the semester. So I was really hoping not only that would this lead to higher level deliverables at the end of the 3-week period, but also provide both the French and the American students with an opportunity to collaborate with more than just their partner. So try to stimulate exchange of ideas in a virtual environment through this kind of structured feedback process. And finally, this all led up to a final presentation where the students actually recorded their presentations. So they weren't live, they were about 30 minutes in duration, where the students had to take me from their investment strategy all the way through their operational plan, provide support for all of their assumptions, provide citations that justify where they got their data, and ultimately lay out this compelling investment strategy, almost like it was an investment pitch, telling me why I should deploy my capital as a fund manager or a portfolio manager into their fund and into the property they've proposed in a French context. So that was the general structure of the course. And it kind of led to some interesting observations that all of you have lots of experience in the classroom. So you know some things go quite to plan, some things don't go to plan at all, and some things fall somewhere in the middle. So I wanted to wrap up with a discussion of some of the key takeaways that I had from a one-off class like this that I think is valuable and can be incorporated in lots of different settings, but it's something that I'll do differently in the event I offer this class again. So first off, one thing I was really concerned about was the quality of deliverables. Would students with a relative lack of guidance be able to put together nice real estate investment analyses in a 3-week period, working virtually with a French counterpart in a market that they have no exposure for in the past? And really, I was quite surprised by this. I thought the deliverables were very good. Students tended to put together pretty tight presentations. They were thoughtful for the most part, and the recordings came out better than I thought they would. That it's a little bit trickier than you might imagine to do a co-presentation between a student in France and a student in the US, all via Zoom, all recorded and all packaged in a way that's professional. But the students figured it out, and they put together really tight videos, and something I wouldn't be embarrassed to show my colleagues to say this was actually a valuable experience for the students. Another takeaway, while this was packaged as a real estate course, I think that's probably the least valuable attribute of it for the students that participated. Largely, this came out as a case study or an exercise in collaboration. And if I had this to do over again, I really think I would have focused maybe even more on this than I did about real estate fundamentals. So I think there were opportunities for students to really reflect on things that worked well in terms of collaboration, things that worked poorly, and maybe really think about best practices that might lead to more fruitful collaboration with peers in the future, especially under challenging circumstances, right? Where students are fighting different time zones. They're fighting a lack of familiarity with each other and kind of a lack of trust. They're fighting a lack of familiarity with the market, and to some degree, a lack of familiarity with real estate, specifically the real estate student, or excuse me, the French students who are finance students that were communicating with less kind of general vocabulary about real estate than the American students. So I think they learned a great deal about overcoming those types of challenges to work effectively in teams. Pairing non-real estate students with real estate students. I thought this worked out better than I expected. But I think the French students with their finance backgrounds brought this really analytical perspective to the table, whereas the American students were a little bit more creative in thinking about real estate investment strategies. So putting them together, I think was fruitful, and it is definitely something I would do again. Pairing undergraduates and graduate students. I wouldn't say this was beneficial, but it proved more manageable than I anticipated. And surprisingly, for different reasons. Initially, I thought that the undergraduates may bring a little bit of a lack of maturity and a lack of professionalization to these projects, and the graduate students might be a little bit disappointed. And I actually found just the opposite. And the reason for this was we kind of cherry picked the high performing undergraduates to participate in this project, whereas it was a more general population of graduate students. So what I found was the undergraduates were actually trying to lead the project. And it led to some kind of unexpected tensions where you've got these 22-year-old US students trying to outline and manage the process with these graduate students ready to enter the workforce. So I think they had to work through some of that to meet in the middle and be able to collaborate effectively. I found all students would benefit from a review of real estate fundamentals. I think I took for granted that our real estate students had retained more over the course of their studies than they really had. If I would do it again, I would actually require them to sit in on the lectures, even though they'd be a review of market analysis, would be a review of financial analysis, would be a review of operational principles. I found our students need it, and they especially need it right before they enter the workforce and graduate from an undergraduate program. So I think a course like this would be a nice venue to provide that type of review.
Dustin,
also,
you're just running out of time.
Gotcha. I can do it in 2 minutes or 1 minute. Do I have 1 minute, Deborah?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Perfect. Won't surprise anybody here. I found critical thinking skills lag behind technical skills, so they could execute the analysis, but when you actually asked me to describe the logic behind it, they had more difficulty. Found students had trouble interpreting secondary data, so they can go find market research reports, but actually evaluating that data within the context of their project was far more difficult for them to put forth in a concise presentation. Multiple rounds of peer reviews. I found this was not a particularly valuable strategy, that students did a really good job on their first round of peer reviews, and after that, they started to phone it in. That they got bored, they got complacent, and started to reproduce the type of critiques they put forth in their first evaluation rather than thinking about it critically as they moved to the next round. And finally, I think that even despite all these challenges and problems I had in structuring the class, I think virtual exchange is largely an untapped opportunity or resource. And I don't think this is ever going to supplant formal study abroad where students have that true cultural exchange, but I think it is something that can be incorporated into classes to give students a taste of international investing in a way that's really cost effective and manageable for a large group of students.
Thank you very much. Talk about under-promising and over-delivering. That was a really good presentation. I really enjoyed it. We've run out of time, but I'm sure that Paloma will let me, or Eamon or whoever's organizing this will let me have one question.
Go ahead.
I think we're all blown away.
Well, I have a general question about your experience here and comparing it with my experience in study abroad activities for quite a while. One thing that I found particularly interesting is that there are different contexts, and especially when we exchange students in the program for student research across the Atlantic. So we send students to the US from Vienna and other European universities to the US, and the thing that they find out there most of the time is, well, the terminology is different. The same words, when they use the same words, the meanings are different. This is in regional economics. The political background, the administrative background, all that is different. So for us as researchers, what we learn also is that a lot of the things that we think are given are not given. They are context. So we learn a lot by supervising that. We learn a lot about the implicit assumptions we make in our research. Is that something you experienced as well there?
No question. And one of the things I found fascinating is the different assumptions about how people interact with the built environment, be it how they interact with retail space, office space, multifamily space, industrial space, that the French students brought quite different perspectives than the American students that really underpin how we evaluate real estate projects, right? And how we think about demand for different types of real estate projects. Those different cultural assumptions really matter. And I think it was interesting for the students to get to compare notes on that and to really think about how evaluating projects does really, it's more than just crunching numbers in a spreadsheet. You really have to think about the context of the investment, and that was really valuable for the students.
Well, one particular example we had was a student from California who did compare social housing in Vienna and in the LA area. And she was just struggling with the different meanings of social housing in the two contexts, because there is no stigma of social housing in Vienna, where it's very strong in the US context. So the same term, completely different meanings.
We had exactly that same observation in a student that did a social housing project in France.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's been an amazing session. I feel as though it's really early here at midnight in comparison with you, Dustin, so I won't feel so sorry for myself. I've really enjoyed that session. It's kept me awake and focused, and I'll now pass back to the organizers to take us to the next session.